This is the Men's Room podcast where relief is your duty and your innate self is always welcome. I'm your host, Ish Mendoza, and I am delighted that you stopped by. On this episode, we had a good friend of mine stop by the studio to have a conversation in person, a fellow dad, an entrepreneur, an all-around good guy, Jacob Cross. We'll be digging into some pretty intense topics like mental health and therapy and a lot of other good stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're rolling. This is the Men's Room podcast, and it's a little awkward because this is our very first in-person live chat. So you're going to hear all the clankings of the ice in the cups and everything else that comes in there. Yeah. Yeah, I'm here with Jacob Cross, really, really good friend of mine, owner and operator of Pools Plus. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to let you tell me a little bit about who you are. Like, what are the things that make you you?
Oh, I don't really like talking about myself, so it's not always the easiest thing to do. But, like you said, the number one thing that most people ask is, what do you do for a living? So I am a pool service owner and operator. I do that with my wife, Lauren, and we've been in business for about 5 years now. Slowly moving out of the service side of things and more into kind of construction repairs and programming of equipment and whatnot. So specializing in certain aspects of the pool industry. And then outside of that, I am a husband, a father of 2 kids, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. And that's absolutely probably brings me the most joy in life, being around them and hanging out with them in family time. And then, just involved in church, do some Bible study stuff, try to hang out with friends as much as possible, and kind of let that define who I am.
Yeah, it's a very necessary service and industry in the Central Valley where we're at because it's hot. Boy, it's hot.
Yep.
I wanted to talk also about what do you remember about the time that you and I met? How do you remember us meeting, and what was that like? What was the situation or circumstances?
Oh yeah, no, that I remember that clearly. So I had actually just found out pretty much that we were pregnant with our first son, and really excited about that. But trying to, you try to keep it a secret for a while just to make sure everything holds up and you're not jumping the gun too early on things. But yeah, I got the first ultrasound, and I didn't want it to crinkle, and so the only thing I had in my car at the time was my Bible. So I put it in the pages so it wouldn't crinkle. And then when we got to church that Sunday, I had forgotten to take it out. So it was just with me. And I was like, all right, I'm showing everybody. And so I just went around showing people. I'm like, look at this handsome little boy in there. And I remember I think you were prepping coffee, and I was running rounds for security or something like that, and came in there.
At our former church.
Yeah, former church. And you're standing there and you're like, dude, I heard you were having a baby. And I was like, yeah, look at this picture. And you're like, that's awesome. And then you said, but don't tell anybody, but my wife's pregnant too. And I was like, oh, shoot. So, yeah, we just kind of hit it off from there. And I just think it's funny, we've talked several times over the last 5 or 6 years that we've known each other. It's like there's a lot of things we don't have in common. And you wouldn't think you'd be friends with people, but, you open it up for one situation, one conversation like that. It turns out you can look past a lot of the indifferences and find common ground on a lot of things. And that's just kind of how our friendship began. Yeah,
you made a great point though, like the way we first initially started our friendship by a common ground, and then once the layers start unraveling themselves, you kind of find out the differences that we have, but also like the many similarities to all these things. And I think that's a lot of what's one of the beautiful things about actually taking the time to get to know people is that once you start really getting to know them, you can find out how similar you are, even if you maybe wouldn't have given a chance to someone based on whatever reason, like appearance or political affiliation and all these other things. And so, yeah, thanks for taking a chance.
Yeah. I'm just glad you were pregnant when I was. Well, our wives.
Yeah. That's another thing is like, I like, I always said it, and many people always say that is we're pregnant, and they always include them, but the wives, they do the hard part. So
yeah, we do the fun part, they do the hard part.
Yeah, exactly. But don't get me wrong. I mean, I try to make up for it with, taking the night shift once the baby actually comes and doing the diaper changes and everything you can that, we can biologically. I'm going to get into a little bit more of your story, but
Okay.
I just kind of wanted to set the table a little bit about, who you are. And so as a part of this, the podcast, especially when there's a guest, I wanted to have this sort of segment that we call Weapon of Choice. And so I asked you ahead of time about something that you fancy these days or something you're into. And I brought a mead.
Ooh.
I know that was something that you had talked about having an interest in. I don't know much about meads, but I actually I did a little bit of digging and I found this is called a Bunratty mead, and it's a Irish medieval
Nice.
mead.
It's gonna have a lot of honey flavors to it.
Yeah. So I kind of did some digging around, and I think of it when I think of the word mead, I think of like the medieval times or like a bar wench that serves the mead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like honestly, it kind of stems from that. They back then it wasn't as safe to drink just regular water, so a lot of times it was distilled, with alcohol to make it safer.
Yeah, because you could travel with that. Like that's how they like did their excursions and stuff like that too. They would have stuff that fermented over time and things, and it helped have something to drink. So a mead is a Renaissance era alcoholic beverage made of fermented honey, like you mentioned. So it's commonly thought of as a honey wine or a honey beer, but I found that mead is actually neither. It falls into its own category of alcohol. So that's the background of what I did in a quick Google search for what mead is. I'm gonna
imagine if you didn't have Google.
Exactly. Imagine like back in the day. Did you ever have to do this where you actually like did research for a school project or something, and you had to go like to the library, check out a book, do like research independently like that, or were you too young to?
No. I had to do that. I had to go into the library, and then you had your like your table of contents that you would find the card for the section, and then you'd have to go to that section and find the book you wanted, or at least a book on the topic you're looking for. But yeah,
I can recall a time where the even the way you cite a source changing from like they had to kind of put parameters around how you found it on a website. And I remember early on, it's like, I guess that's how you cite it. You just have to do that.
Yeah.
But let me pour you a little bit here.
Sure. It just smells good. Nothing sounds more enjoyable than the sound of liquid being poured into a glass.
Yeah, I actually was hoping
to be a glass. It can't be like a styrofoam cup or anything else. It's got to be a glass.
I mean, styrofoam cups have its place in the alcohol game, but
I've gotten so bougie that I pour my canned beers into a glass now before I drink them.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Prost or salud. Do you have a way you've historically said cheers or anything?
Bottoms up.
That's one. There's a Spanish one that's arriba, abajo, al centro, adentro. It's like like to the left, to the right, to the front, to the back. No, I'm just kidding.
To the window of the wall.
Yeah, to the window, to the wall. No, yeah. So yeah, that's a part of the weapon of choice for today. Man, this is delicious, actually.
It is.
Yeah. So what have you had any good meads lately, or you just like that came to you? And
I don't get them very often. They're kind of more of a treat. One, they're pretty strong in alcohol content, so it's not really one you would necessarily drink and then go drive home afterwards.
It's a slow sipper for sure.
It's a slow slipper. It's also one that I think is a good end cap. So if you, I know we went out and had those flights of beers at the one place that doesn't pay for promotion, so we won't mention it.
But maybe they will.
Yeah.
Out of the barrel.
Yep, maybe.
Fresno, California.
But we did a couple flights of beer, and then they had a rotating mead, and so we ended on that one, and it hits different than the beer, so it's kind of a nice end as long as you can pace yourself accordingly.
Yeah, I went on a bit of a rabbit hole when I was doing some research for the mead, and I saw a guy that was actually like brewing it, and he had it down pretty much to a science, but he had an 8-minute video that kind of explained it. And it's similar to like the way homebrewers do their beers. They put it in a carboy and they add yeast to make it ferment. But obviously the thing that ferments is the honey. So the honey actually has a very distinct taste. But if you leave it with just the initial like fermentation process for the honey, it'll take away the flavor of the honey. So he actually added honey to it afterwards, and that continued to keep the flavor. So it was like a honey base that fermented, but a honey flavor added in addition to it.
Makes it sweet.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I like it too. It's just a smoother drink. You're not super strong in the alcohol burn like you would with a whiskey or a tequila.
Right.
But you're not as bubbly as you would be with a champagne or a beer or everyone's favorite, the White Claws these days. So
yeah, it's also, I mean, it's great because as a guy, you can still like keep your man card and have a nice mead, but little do they know it's a very honey based flavorful drink.
Yep.
We talked about the citation source when writing papers, but your story is really interesting, and I want to get into talking a little bit about it. I know it, but I'm going to act as if I'm a person meeting you for the first time and wanted to hear your story. So
you don't go into teaching.
Okay, that's a good disclaimer. You didn't start off as a business owner, right? That was like
nope.
The way I think of it is when you were a kid, how did you imagine yourself as an adult? That could be career-wise or even appearance-wise or anything like that. Was there something that you envisioned as a kid, or did you not put into any thought as a kid?
I thought I'd be a lot thinner,
Same.
But
Same.
No, when I reflect back and just kind of what I wanted to be as an adult, I think the only real big things that I thought about was I wanted to be a husband and I wanted to be a father. Outside of that, I didn't have necessarily a job career or like a passion that would, lead to income. So there wasn't anything specific, but I know as I was going through high school, I was doing sports, starting to get really good at water polo. So went into college playing water polo. And then, if you're going to base your whole life around a sport, pick one you can actually make money at, because water polo basically ends at the collegiate level. And there's not much more you can do at that point other than coach.
Although it's probably a better opportunity to get a scholarship because it's a less competitive, saturated sport that you can potentially get.
Generally speaking, with the water polo community is like they are straight A students. They earn high scholarships, so it actually really is good for getting yourself into college and going that path and having fun while you're doing all of that. But
plus that water polo bod.
Yep. I used to be thin. See, I used to have that V.
You have to look a certain way if you're going to be rocking a Speedo.
I'm just saying, when I tell people I used to wear a Speedo and they look at me now like, that's gross.
But yeah. I mean, obviously, of course, you have to maintain this. But I
actually found my old college Speedo the other day, and right before we went to a beach trip. So I threw it on real quick in front of their wife, and she's like, "You should wear that when you serve pools." I was like, "Yeah, no chance."
Only for the bedroom, honey.
Yep. I'm trying to get more clients, not scare them away.
Ironically, I don't. It's crazy. I never played water polo. Never did that. Even in passing, I didn't really know any water polo players from high school. But as in adulthood, I've strangely just like encountered other people that are like water polo players. So, for example, I used to work with a girl who's originally from Seattle, and she moved to Barcelona, Spain, to be with her now fiance, who is a professional water polo player, and so they both played in a professional league there.
Oh yeah, in Spain.
Yeah.
So in the European countries, it's a pretty big sport.
Mm-hmm.
Serbia and Croatia, it's like their national sport. So over there's definitely avenues to play professionally, and it just involves a lot though. For us to move out of state, move away from family.
Yeah.
I was also starting to date my wife at the time that I was wrapping up, college. So I was like, all right, do I want to uproot and lose that connection? Yeah, let's go to Serbia, Lauren. That'll be fun. I'm sure there's pools to service over there, but
for sure, you'd have to learn a new language and be a part of a different culture and all that stuff too.
I'm all for taking risks. Like, don't get me wrong, but risks that involve traveling away from your connections and your networking, they just don't seem wise.
For sure.
But for other people it works out, or maybe they have connections that they would work out for them if they moved. It just wasn't my cards.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So there's a lot of the people that they don't have much of like a root or a foundation here, either locally or a reason to stick around, and so it gives a really good opportunity to have a clean slate and move. Even the timeline of your life, maybe you're fresh out of college or a young person and kind of trying to find yourself and stuff too. But when you get to a certain age and you start valuing things, I you know my story a little bit too, but like for me, I was a aimless wanderer for a long time and kind of trying to find myself too. But because I'm so close to my family, because I have such roots with the people I love here, it always brought me back to Fresno, even though I went on a bit of a journey too. But so like this is the community that we have around us, and now in fatherhood and in parenthood, man, you value that so much. Having family to help watch.
Once you start a family, man, you need support, and it doesn't matter if it's a biological family or just a church group or good friends. It doesn't matter who it is. They say it takes a village to raise a kid, and it's pretty true. You can do all you want, and but you're so blinded by your own desire to be a good father and your own desire to raise your kids upright that sometimes it takes a second set of eyes outside of your house to point out maybe a flaw or a pivot that you can make to better parent and correct your kids.
Yeah, it's ironic, or maybe ironic's not the right word to it, but you haven't yet heard, this is inside baseball here, but you haven't yet heard the
Pregnant
episode
again?
No. God, no. No, you haven't heard episode number 1, which is a solo episode that I put out because it's not published yet. But episode number 1, I talked about community, and so basically that is, there's often times where you need to seek that out, or you're just kind of involved in a natural community, depending on. I'm sure there's even like layers to that. Like there might be. You talked about your vendors and stuff for pool things. You probably encounter people that are in that community as well.
Yeah, we got. I mean, when I look at it, there's probably about 7 or 8 different communities that I belong to, and some are very specific to work-related things, and some are very specific to just friendships. Some have to do with the church that we go to, and so you kind of have those circles. And yeah, when you run into tough times or you're struggling with something, it's always nice to know that if you belong to a community, that there's someone you can reach out to. I know for work specifically, there's always someone I can call when I'm having issues, and it's like
they've seen it before. Or something.
Yeah, they've seen it, or they know the answer, or maybe it's not even something that I can do. Like it's broken, but they're like, I got one of those. I'll send it over to you. Yeah. So there's just things like that help out, and then community of just our regular life stuff. It's nice to be able to get a date night here and there. It's nice to my brother has a lot of kids, and his mother-in-law has opened up their house a lot for swimming and things like that. So I know my kids and wife get to go enjoy that while I work, but it's good to know that they get to be around their cousins and have that kind of community and support. Yeah,
some of the communities that we are involved in are by choice, and then some of them are just by nature or location or circumstance. I was seeing. I did a deep dive into like the types of communities. This is kind of be a kind of a repeat on that too, but I won't harp on it too much. But essentially, there are people that are victims of. Like there's a community that was built for victims of like the Hurricane Katrina disaster,
Yep.
They all like came together and they started this community. So circumstantially, they had to develop this community by necessity, but also just like as well, they all experienced something similar together too. So yeah, community is super important. And as you kind of navigate the different, phases of your life, seasons of your life, it becomes a really necessary and beautiful thing, honestly.
Yep.
Okay, you mentioned something, and I want to dig into that a little bit. So at the top, we talked about our church that we used to go to. I'm not going to get into that church specifically, but I'm going to get into the church, the capital C church.
Sure.
You and I are both believers, and I don't want to speak on your behalf, but how does your belief, or how does so a lot of the things that I would say is I've come across a lot of people that are not necessarily Christians or don't have a religious background. So I've been asking kind of the question just naturally of like, what's your North Star? What's the thing that anchors you? Like, what do you default to, or what do you go back to? What about for you as a believer? How does that like shape your identity and who you are?
Yeah, and maybe you'll ask this later too, I don't know, but you gave me that list of questions to kind of ponder over. And You had one that said, "What's your motto?" And I was thinking about that. Like, I don't have a life motto, but what I have is the Bible. And as I read through it, and I'm struggling with certain things in life, certain seasons, God always gets me to the right verse that kind of provides that hope for that situation. And so I usually write them on the mirror or something, and that's just what I focus on, because that becomes my mindset when I wake up. Reading the Bible verse doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it does help me to realign my thinking and put my trust in God. So that's mainly what I do as a North Star. I turn to God and allow Him to work at me and change me and transform me.
Yeah, and it's kind of ongoing, right? I mean,
absolutely. I'm far from perfect. I wish I was, but
you're not perfect. What?
No. Ask my wife.
She can give me a whole list of things. I'm sure that she'll just rattle off the top of the head. Like, where do I start?
No, she's really good. She's very gracious. But no, the Bible has always been that grounding factor for me. It reminds me of what's important, and it helps me keep my mindset, focused, because the world's crazy. I mean, there's a lot going on out in the world, not just like politically, but spiritually and relationally, and from state to local levels. Like, there's just a lot of things that go on that are absolutely crazy when you sit down and think about it. But you can sit there and fixate on that and live a life of fear and anxiety, or you can meditate on God's word and then use that as a refuge to say, you know what, that is the world. That's what the world has to offer.
Yeah.
And we can engage in that, or we can pull ourselves kind of back from that and kind of sit back and watch the craziness and provide hope for people.
Yeah. I'm with you. The one of the questions that I've been kind of like digesting or chewing on these days is just like, how to explain a set of beliefs or religion to someone that maybe doesn't even have a foundation of that. And it's crazy, because I often think about like all the circumstances, speaking of circumstantial groups and communities and things like that. We had the luxury of being born into a kind of a culture around us, but I always think about like even something as small as, we're born in California. What would my life be like if I was born on the East Coast? What would be different?
You'd have a better accent.
Yeah, for sure. A Boston accent, man, that'd be good. That'd be wicked smart. Or like a New York accent. I can't even do it. I mean, I love East Coast hip hop, and so I was always like admiring the East Coast guys, like the New York guys and stuff. But I could never like emulate that accent the way they did. Like, they would always say stuff like when they were talking about coffee, it's coffee, and like when they say her, it's like give it to her, it's her.
Oh yeah. I'm not even gonna try. I'm on a recording here. Yeah. We'll play around with accents afterwards.
All you can do is a Scotch accent, but
not even.
maybe a couple of whiskeys in, you can.
Hey, this is my urinate self, so I gotta stick with my voice.
There you go. No, but basically what I was thinking is like, circumstantially, like I one time I have a friend that I used to work with who was a Muslim, and he really enlightened me to a lot of like his kind of cultural like beliefs. I was really interested. I always ask him a lot of questions and stuff too. But like, he was born in a different country, and so in his country, like that was a predominant religion. And so for us here being in the U.S., it's like there's a better chance of us to being Christians statistically than it is to have a different religion in that way too. But like, yeah, it's an interesting way, because it's. I still choose to believe the way I believe, and there's certain events and things that have happened to me personally that have solidified that. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm always curious about like what is your thoughts about that? Like what if you were born into a different sort of lifestyle? Like how would you be able to navigate that, or do you feel like?
Well, I've been actually contemplating this thought a lot lately because of the topic of election. And whether or not we come to God or He comes to us, kind of thing, and free will versus predestination.
Yeah.
And as I really dig into different verses, it just seems to me that like God's the one that's going to do the work in the heart, and then we respond. So it shouldn't matter where you're born. It shouldn't matter, the circumstances that come across. Like if God opens your heart and your ears to hear what he has to say, then it's going to happen. And then you choose to respond. But, because I was thinking about the way that like semantics mean a lot to me, being a former English teacher. And people always talk about like, it's what I did in my faith. It's my faith. It's my faith. And I was thinking to myself, like, the Bible's pretty clear about it. It's not us. It's God doing all the work. And so we don't do God's work. We are just a testament of his work. Mm-hmm. And so
we're byproducts, or like, that we're...
Yeah, we get to share in the glory of his work, which is cool. But there's nothing that we can do individually to further his work. It's him in us doing the work. And so, talking about the different scenarios, different places, the last I heard, the fastest growing church right now is over in Iran, which is one of the most prosecuted places for Christians. And so you're saying that, like, if I was somewhere else, maybe I wouldn't have this belief, but God's going to grab a hold of the heart of the person that he wants.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it literally is more of a direct choice at that point, because you're not culturally influenced by things around you too. But I don't know enough about election and predestination. I'm
I don't
not
know anything either. I'm just wrestling with it.
Yeah, but that's always an interesting thought to me, because it's almost like, the age old story is that, did we even choose this life, or is this life already chosen and already written for us? And if so, like, what's the point of free will then? What's the point of us even having a choice, or making choices every day?
I was going back a little bit in the conversation, thinking about like most people accept the Jewish religion. If someone's a Jew, they could be a Jew by birth, or they could be a Jew by faith, and
or cultural view.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the only, I think, faith and cultural crossover that we all accept as normal. But the reality is that the same thing happens here in the U.S. There's a lot of people who we'll say they're Catholic, they're born Catholic, they're baptized as babies, but they don't practice the Catholic faith.
Right.
And I would even go further to say that there's a lot of people out here that would say that they're Christians because they're born into a Christian home. But when you really look at the fruit that they produce, you could say, okay, these people are not followers of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm gonna totally like go out of a like a theological thought and go with like very surface level thought. We're watching Peaky Blinders. I don't know if you've ever seen that show.
Yep.
But we're still in season, we just started season 2. But there's a part where he was asking the girl. He says, like, you're a good little Catholic girl. He makes the assumption, and then she doesn't respond to that right away. And he's like, "Oh, don't tell me you're a Protestant." But it was just like it was a cultural thing, because it was exactly that. Like, I mean, these people are slicing throats and doing all this stuff, but they're culturally Catholic. Exactly what you're saying.
No, I've been kind of mentoring a person lately, and we were just talking about reading through Matthew chapters 5-8, which are the Beatitudes, and I was kind of expressing to him that, like, in this section, that Christ was really talking about not seeing it as a checkbox. Like, it's not a religion, it's not a cultural thing that you should be doing, and that's what it had turned into at the time of Jesus' teaching, and I would say it's still that way today. Mm-hmm. But his whole point was that we're not supposed to be like that. We are supposed to be living by faith and active in it. And it's not just something that we check a box and say that we do for kudo points with other people. Yeah.
It's brownie points.
Yeah. Well, it's part of that whole community thing, right? I want to belong to this community, but I don't want to necessarily put my faith in God.
Yeah. I asked you about this earlier, but I wanted to dig in a little bit more. You alluded to it. I wanted to talk about. So as Christians, a lot of the things that we go through are very like practical and logical and even like applicable in a lot of today's sense. Even from the Bible's perspective, there's a lot of good historical data, but there's a lot of like personal, like applicable, encouraging things as well. And you talked about two subjects. You talked about how that works in terms of like using the Bible to mitigate or to remedy anxiety and things like that as well. It's a little bit of a foreshadowing, but I'd love to hear more about your story about how you transitioned from being a teacher into a business owner.
Yeah. So going way back to the earlier part of that conversation, when I was getting ready to wrap up my college career and realizing that water polo wasn't going to be anything that I could really survive off of, I looked into the most logical, move from that point would be become a teacher and a coach and do that in combo. And so I spent some time in prayer about it, but like I said, I never really had a plan of what I want to do for a living growing up, so it's kind of just a pipe dream at that point. And so I laid the groundwork for getting into the teaching credential program and did my applications through Fresno Pacific, and it got approved. And then
shout out Pacific.
Yep. And then got my first set of schedules, and I just remember that literally everything I was doing in my life that was bringing me joy conflicted with every class I had that semester for my credentialing program, and it was like, man, I have to like give up my entire life to go right here, right now. And so I prayed about it. I walked out of the admissions office and just started praying about it, and in the middle of my prayer, I get this phone call, and did the whole, excuse me, God, but I'm going to take this phone call. We'll pick this back up here in a second. And I answer this phone call, and it's actually the HR from Central Unified saying that he heard I wanted to be a teacher. He heard that I wanted to be a water polo coach, and that they were strongly looking for a water polo coach. And basically, they would look into kind of an emergency credential situation where I can come work immediately while getting my credential. And so,
shout out Central Unified.
Yep. But I wouldn't say there's a lot of answered prayers in my life, but that was definitely one that I was like, okay, clearly God wants me to go this direction. And so I went forward with it. I did the credentialing program, coached, and had a really good time. Connected with some of the teachers. I got to obviously interact with a lot of students there, starting out in the high school age groups. And then once my credential actually cleared, I got placed in a middle school group, 7th and 8th graders teaching English. And I'll say it again, like, if anyone asks, I really enjoyed the kids. A lot of people freak out when they hear middle school. They think, the worst.
Oh, yeah.
But to me, it's the best age, because they still have a lot of their innocence and that kind of wildness that comes from being adolescents. Mm-hmm. But they're starting to also mature and find themselves and just develop their personality a little more, and you can have adult conversations with them. And so that was a fun experience with the kids. But teaching itself isn't everything that I thought it was made out to be. There's a lot of back end work. I hate grading. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I was looking for that chat GTB or whatever to start grading my essay papers for me, so I didn't have to do that work.
Oh, man. If you would have just waited 12, 15 more years.
I know. Well, funny you mentioned that, because it's like you take your lunch breaks and go into where all the teachers are having their lunches. And it's like every day the teachers I was around were talking about, like, oh, man, I only have 10 more years till I can retire. I'm going to retire in 5 more years. And I'm sitting here thinking, I got 35 more years of doing this before I can retire. And it just started to get real depressing. And I'm sure everyone's had that teacher in high school that hated their job, and it was miserable going to their class. And I said, I don't want to ever
think of a few.
Yep,
Yeah.
I didn't want to ever be that kind of teacher. And so as I was starting to get really anxious and kind of depressed about being in that atmosphere, I started making an exit strategy to get out of it and save myself from all that turmoil, but also potentially saving students from having a really crappy teacher who didn't care about his job.
Was there an event or a moment where you felt the sort of shift, or was it just kind of gradually over time where you started feeling some weight, or how did that look for you?
There was a lot of little factors that built up, But the final straw, there was, you know, I was supposed to be in a certain classroom coming back, so I had prepped it the year prior. That way I didn't have to do any work like the week before school. And like the day before school starts, I get a notification that my classroom assignment had changed. And the teacher that got my classroom had already gone in and like boxed all my stuff up and moved it. So I was like, what the heck, man? You could have called me, not touched my stuff. But I went and did it and moved classrooms. And I couldn't find a handful of books that I bought because I created like my own little library for kids to check out and read books. And I bought books that maybe weren't available to them, and good quality books, the Harry Potter books, a bunch of those, the Series of Unfortunate Events books, which are great middle school age books.
Yeah.
And they went missing. And I had a first period prep. So what I would do to show that I was actually on school at time is I would check in with the office just so they knew I wasn't coming in late because I didn't have to be there, you know?
It's like a punch card almost.
Yep. Because the teaching atmosphere is pretty lax about that kind of stuff. Kind of crazy. But as I was doing that, the office lady there was like, hey, this teacher called in sick and the sub can't get here in such short notice. So can you cover the first period class? And what they would do is they'd give you a comp hour for covering a class. So cover 8 classes, you get a comp day off paid, and they can't say no. Like when you want it, you get it.
It's nice.
So yeah, I started 7 classes like every morning, but one of them happened to be in that old classroom, and a student needed a Kleenex, and I couldn't find any. So opened a drawer, and when I opened it up, all my books were hidden in that drawer. And I was like, she stole them. And I was like, screw this, I'm out. So during that prep period, or not prep period, but I was subbing for that class and they were just doing their paperwork, I started designing logos for a pool company.
Did you? So, okay, that's an interesting like point. Did you, because of your like experience with, water polo and swimming and things like that, was that kind of
Unrelated.
Unrelated. So what was the desire, or what was the idea? How was the idea of owning a pool company like even born?
My stepdad's a landscaper.
Okay.
My mom's a teacher.
Okay.
My mom would get pink slip periodically, just when they were doing budget cuts, things like that, even if she'd been teaching 10 years. And especially about 2009, 2010, when things in the market really crashed and they started doing that a little bit more. That's right when I was getting into college. So my stepdad's like, you should learn to do something with your hands so that you have a fallback plan in case teaching doesn't work out. And I said, oh, you want me to do landscaping? He's like, oh, heck no, it's too hard. Do something easy. Like
massage therapy.
He goes, oh, I see those pool guys. They're in and out in 30 seconds. Be one of those guys. And so he actually was renting a spot to park his trucks from a pool company. And he contacted their manager and asked basically if he would kind of let me shadow him. So I worked a whole summer without being paid just to learn what it was about. Took a lot of notes and then started with 10 pools. And I actually serviced those pools while I was in college, serviced those pools while I was teaching. So the first 3 years that I was teaching, I was also working pools on the weekends. And like I said, as I was getting frustrated with things, I hit the point where I was matching my teaching income with my pool work just from weekends. So I was like, oh man, I can just work weekends. Well, I would obviously change the date so I didn't have to work weekends, but
and you didn't have
I could work 2 days a week and make the same amount of money.
And you didn't even have to do a comp day, huh?
Nope, no comp days. But I'd say the one short side of things is that I didn't really plan for the fact that I did have dual income at that point. Mm-hmm. So when I quit, I lost half my income for a bit.
Yeah. You get accustomed to the lifestyle.
Yeah, a little bit. But it all worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And we don't have to get into this in detail, but one of the stories that you shared with me was the first time that, and we can take this out if you want to as well. But you talked about like there was a point where you just felt this weight or this anxiety and this sort of panic attack. Are you comfortable with sharing that?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing that. I was actually working out at a CrossFit gym quite a bit at the time, and I just kind of felt like I had some swollen feet, so I put on some compression socks. I heard it was supposed to help a little bit, and I get to class, and everything's like normal for the first 2 periods, But by the third period, man, I'm just starting to sweat and feel like I can't breathe. And I'm thinking to myself, like, man, maybe I'm compressing blood from these compression socks. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the middle of class, I just take my shoes and socks off. Kind of funny, but I thought that would alleviate some of that.
You could just
feeling.
say that you were a hippie teacher, just
yeah. But quickly realized that it wasn't bringing any kind of relief. So I was like, okay, this is something bigger than just compression socks. And I really thought I was having a heart attack. So called down to the office and just said, hey, I need admin in here immediately. And I didn't wait. I just went out the classroom, started walking myself down to the nurse's office, and then admin came running up and they're like, what's wrong? I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. I'm going to go in the office. He's like, okay. So he covered the class. I sat down. They took my vitals. She's like, you're fine. I'm like, I don't feel fine. She's like, I think you're having a panic attack. I was like, oh, okay. That doesn't help.
Did you know what a panic attack was, or had you heard of one? Or?
Oh, I've heard of them, and I've seen people have them. Kind of like migraines too. Like you see people have migraines, but until you experience one, you kind of think they're faking it, right?
Dude, that's me.
Yeah, you can't understand what the person's feeling because it's all internal. So the same thing with that panic attack. I'm literally at the point where I feel like I'm dying internally, and on the outside everything's fine. And so yeah, it's kind of a weird feeling. You'll definitely have empathy for people once you've gone through one yourself.
Right.
But yeah, that was a big indicator for me too that I wasn't doing the job that I should be doing.
For sure. Yeah, it's an alarming flag, red flag or pink flag or whatever color flag that it is about, that. And maybe there was other factors that were, playing into that too, but like in the circumstance of the environment that you were at, literally being in a classroom and attributing it to that at the time was probably pretty huge and pretty eye-opening as far as with all the other factors around you, knowing that that's potentially something that you were going to move away from. Now looking back, how do you feel about the decision you made to move away from education and to become a business owner?
I absolutely love it. Especially in more recent years, my wife's gotten more involved with helping out, so it's just another avenue for us to continually connect. Not always positive when you're running a business, but at the end of the day, we have to set aside our business brains and reconnect as husband and wife. But it is really enjoyable for me to be a family-owned and operated business, and I get to control a lot more. It's kind of weird. You think, and you hear people say, like, go into business for yourself and you get to control your schedule. That's not necessarily true. Like, when the work calls, you have to take it, and if you don't get paid. So You don't really get to control scheduling. I mean, there's often times that I'm working 14, 15-hour days. We're not supposed to work weekends, but I think I've worked every Saturday for the last, 30 Saturdays, at least half days. But you still get to control a lot of things. The things that interest me more in the pool world, like I can devote more of my time into that. So not necessarily like that regular maintenance thing, but learning how to really optimize someone's pool by adding technology to it and pairing it with their phones and pairing it with their Alexa to where that customer can just sit in their house and say, hey, Alexa, turn on the pool light, and bam, you got a party in the backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was about 2 years ago that, I really... Because I used to say when I first started, I was like, I don't know, I'm not a pool professional. Like, I'm just doing service out here. And I think I kind of went to say that to somebody who had literally called for a pool professional to come out and do an evaluation. So it's like, you don't want to hear, oh, I'm not a pool professional, I'm just a service guy, right? But it just hit me that, like, man, I've actually spent the last 3 to 5 years devoting my life to this industry and getting to that point where I am a professional, in regards to my industry. I hold a lot of certifications and done a lot of trainings and courses that really elevate my ability to bring quality service as well as innovating technology to people's backyards.
You don't have a personal motto that you can think of, but does Pools Plus have a slogan or motto?
Yeah, all your pool needs plus more.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, which someone else actually has that as their tagline too. And then oddly enough, like 1 year after opening our business and registering and doing all the paperwork, there's another company that opened up with the same name out of Visalia.
Oh,
So
no.
if you happen to Google me, I'm the Fresno one. And I may be rebranding soon just to avoid that confusion.
There you go. But what you could do to stand out above the rest is you can hire only plus size people, you know? So it's like pools plus size. You can take that one for free.
I don't know how that would go with marketing.
Consider me your business consultant. No, I mean, thanks for sharing. I think that one of the things that you and I have kind of talked about, and just, you know, even with that story, sharing about moving into being a business owner from education and just kind of the experiences you've had with regard to mental health, is pretty huge. The thing is that we as men, we don't talk about this kind of stuff enough.
Nope.
We don't, maybe even at all. And so, you know, there's a bunch of things that, like, you know, as I'm in my 30s now, I've talked about this more than I have.
Late 30s.
Late 30s, yeah, thank you. I've talked about this more in the recent years than I have ever in my life. And so it's probably maybe the sign of the times, but it's also like it's a necessary conversation that we need to have as men, but also just as people in general, just talking about this.
Oh yeah, mental health is not gender specific. So, you know, after having that panic attack, I didn't really share with anybody about it. I did tell my wife, but didn't really share why. I just shared it happened. Mm-hmm. And this kind of was the way I operated, right? Things would happen. There'd be literally a physical response to things, but that was obvious to people, but there's no deeper conversation of what was going on in my brain. And so when 2020 hit and, you know, we had this global pandemic that was just changing a lot of factors in life for everybody. In our industry, it, you know, supply and demand disappeared. So I couldn't get chemicals to service pools, and the price of everything's going up. So I have to charge more. It just added a lot of stress during that time. Mm-hmm. And so I actually reached out to a therapist and started going into regular sessions just to really offload those things, because if you bottle it up, you know, one, it could lead to a panic attack, but two, it just becomes that consuming thought in your day-to-day, and you don't live in peace. You live in anxiety, you live in stress. The way you respond to people is out of anxiety and stress. So, you know, not necessarily fair to my wife for me to come home and offload on her that anxiety without ever diving into what I'm really feeling. So, yeah, she had been doing therapy for a while. I saw the benefit in her and thought to myself, I need to also up my mental game. Actually, I don't know if you see commercials much anymore because of all the streaming devices, but
I only get commercials from podcasts.
Yeah, there you go. Hulu had a commercial, and there's two guys working out at the gym, and one guy was bench pressing, and he goes, you know, up and then comes down, and then he can't push the weight back up, and his spotter just takes off, like leaves him there struggling, and then the commercial ends, and then the words come up, and it's like, you wouldn't leave your friend with a heavy weight like that, so why are you leaving them when they're struggling with their mental health? And when I saw that commercial, I was like, yeah, I need to go to therapy.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because one event of a panic attack or a feeling of overwhelming anxiety, or in my case, I have migraines, and I think that's the way my body reacts to stresses and things like that. It's not a one-time event. It's a continual kind of thing, just like every other aspect of health. You know, with you have to continue, especially being in your late 30s now.
Yep. You
have to be a little bit more focused on taking care of your physical health and things like that as well. And so if you're not doing that consistently, you can just easily slip through the cracks. You know, in the same way, it's a mental health thing. It's like it's almost a proactive approach to being able to, like, process and think through and have an outlet. I'm proud of you, man. Thank you for sharing that.
And I'm all for it. You know, I encourage everyone to seek talking to a therapist. The one of the reasons why I like it a lot is because most of everybody that I'm in community with knows each other. So I don't really have an outlet to express things that it wouldn't quickly travel around into those communities, and it might not be the best for my image, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So therapy for me is a safe place. But if people are uncomfortable with therapy, a good friend that you can trust, it works just as well. You just need to have a place that you can be heard and seen, things that you're struggling with. And oftentimes I leave a session and it's like nothing was solved and nothing's changed, but I still feel lighter because I know at least somebody sees what I'm feeling.
That's huge. Welcome back. We took a little pee-pee break, but I may or may not keep that in, but
urinate.
Your innate self. Yeah, exactly.
It's the meds room. We can talk about urinate.
Exactly. My idea for each show was to kind of talk about, to get an encapsulated theme, and I don't want to deviate so much from, I think, the mental health aspect of things and stay maybe potentially on topic. But as it relates to your faith, as relates to your experiences in life, what would be a message? This is not part of the question list that I sent you, but I just thought of this right now. But
yeah, I'm so good off the cuff. Thanks.
What would be a message that you would want to have heard, either to for your younger self, or a message potentially with a younger person that's in a situation that they maybe don't know how to navigate in terms of mental health circumstance or something of that nature? What sort of advice would you want to give? Or maybe
I guess it would be to don't be afraid to express yourself, like truly, because a lot of times when we're hurting for some reason, the outward expression isn't the actual true inward expression. It's just the trigger response,
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would say don't be afraid to open up fully and expose yourself. It's such a really vulnerable state of mind. There's a Torrin Wells song that actually has to do with scripture too. So we can take it from the song and actually take it back to scripture. go back to the source. But to be fully known and to be fully loved, it's a really hard concept for us because we are selfish in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very prideful and very self-centered. But if somebody fully knew me, I guess my fear would be that they wouldn't like me because there's a lot of bad things about me.
Mm-hmm.
And then if someone fully loved me, then they must not know me because there's a lot of bad things about me, right? So you kind of navigate this weird spot. But in faith, the cool part is that God fully knows us and he fully loves us. So we can come to him in all of our hurts, in all of our stress, in all of our mental struggles,
Mm-hmm.
and not have to be afraid. But I would, again, encourage younger people or my younger self to have that kind of authentic expressions with just people that you trust.
Almost like your innate self, right?
Your innate self. Yep.
I half joke about that, but I really think that that's a very important message to think about that. So
did you know that my parents are divorced?
I did. I did, yeah.
Yeah. So
how does that affect you?
Well,
how does that shape
just
you?
going into this topic of being your innate self,
Mm-hmm.
Having divorced parents and living from one house to the other throughout the week, I've always felt like I've had kind of dual personalities. There's one way I would respond with my dad at his house with my brothers there, and then there's one way I'd respond and act with my mom and stepdad and step family and brothers on that side, And so I've kind of always had this mixed, I guess, a duality of my personality in some degree. And I think that's kind of normal. I think a lot of people do that. They compartmentalize who they are in the different scenarios they are. And I would say that to really express who you are and to be true to yourself.
I sent you some questions ahead of time. I told you also we may or may not get to them all. But I think we've we've had a decent conversation, and I want to stay on target with kind of the things that we've talked about. But is there anything that you personally have either experienced as of late that has been instrumental in your life, aside from your daily devotions and things that you are encouraged by? But have you been into anything lately? Have you read anything or heard anything lately that's been encouraging to you, or has kind of stood out? The motto or the theme of this show, rather, is one of encouragement and being able to process a lot of the mental health struggles that we have. And so if there's anything maybe along those lines that you're thinking of that you want to share, or maybe not, maybe you want to just like ruin this all by telling me a raunchy joke or something.
Yep. Sounds better. Sounds easier, right?
Yeah.
And that's the default that we go to, right? We want to not deal and talk about the sensitive stuff. Let's just talk about a fart joke.
That's
which
exactly
I have one.
Yeah, that's exactly
when
my
the space
default.
Is available.
I want to talk about that
Lauren,
fart joke.
close your ears.
I want to talk about that fart joke, but yeah, my default is to always
humor.
Yeah, exactly. It's a defense mechanism. I'll do it to like diffuse if I see tension in a room or like no people.
Dude, Robin Williams, man.
Yeah,
he was hurting, but funniest guy you ever met.
I'm not a person that really does well with conflict, I think. And so I use that as sort of a diffuser to in a lot of situations, I think. But so my wife will be the first to tell you that I can ruin any really heartfelt moment with a fart joke.
Dude, you ever see Ted Lasso?
I have not. I've been wanting to get into that.
Get into it. He's kind of like that. He takes every scenario and makes a joke out of it, and it's catchy. You like him for it, but as the seasons develop, you kind of get a bigger picture of what's going on in his life. But I won't spoil it. Getting back to kind of the question you had there. It's hard for me right now. In some aspects, like I don't feel like anything interesting is happening in my life. I wake up every day, I put my boots on, I go to work, provide for my family. I come home, I spend time with them. We do our things. We go to the lake. We hang out with people. Like we have a good time and all that. But I just don't feel like there's really any thought-provoking, intriguing things going on in life until you happen to have a conversation with somebody and they start opening up about things.
Mm-hmm.
And then lately, it's really been, I don't know why, but there's just been some people coming to my life that start saying, "Oh, well, I've always respected your view on faith," or, "Oh, I know you're a man of God. Like, I'm struggling and I want to talk about these things." And so that's really been this whole summer. It's been a lot of conversations with people who are either walked away from faith, haven't had faith, or just starting their faith journey, and conversing with me about them and feeling like I'm a safe place to have those conversations, which is weird for me because I'm like, I don't know either, bro. Like, I'm figuring it out myself. I'm still waking up and doing my devotionals every morning and kind of seeing where that leads me. But in terms of like the whole, again, the mental health and everything going on, the Bible is a really good place for hope. It's a really good place for healing. It's a really good place to be that authentic self. Like I was saying, being fully loved and fully known. I can't judge how those conversations go for the other people, but I feel like there's a lot of life-giving conversations happening lately. And when I look back and reflect on them, I'm pretty excited that I get to be part of those things.
Maybe that's part of the solution. I think sometimes we focus so much about a specific solution or like this profound thing that I think one of the beautiful things about life is the putting on your boots every day and just doing it, doing
My
the
theme
work.
song for this summer has been a Jason Aldean song.
Which is?
I can't even think of the name of it right now, but he takes the tractor another round. You know that song?
I don't.
Oh,
I'm not a huge country.
It'll have to be the intro song for this podcast.
The only country songs I know are the controversial ones that
make the news.
That make the news.
Not our small town.
Not our small town. Fresno's not a small town.
No, not at all.
But a lot of people.
But that in the song, it talks about that he gets up, he goes to work, and basically like prays that his crops don't die, because like ultimately at the end of the day, actually going back to the conversation we had earlier, when I was getting ready to transition out of teaching, I was really struggling with it because I felt that God had called me to be a teacher, and I didn't want to like disappoint Him. I don't want to not do what I was being called to do. And I had lunch with a good friend of mine at the time, and well, he's still a good friend of mine. But anyways, we had lunch, and
did he die?
No, he got married.
Same thing.
But he told me, he goes, Jacob, like, God doesn't care if you're a teacher or you're a janitor or whatever. Like, he just wants you to trust Him. And that always stuck with me. Like, being in this pool profession and really thriving at this point and kind of specializing in things that not everyone can do, I take a lot of pride in that. And it, like, in some ways, it kind of forms who I am. But ultimately, 100 years from now, the pools that I work on probably won't even be around. They're going to be all demolished and something else. So it's not really a defining factor of who I am. What is the way that I carry myself. And so having that integrity in not just my workspace, but my personal life as well, keeping those attributes that are quote unquote righteous, making sure that we're constantly doing the right things. Going back to the motto question, I just get reminded of a verse, which is James 1, verse 12, which says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love Him." And so I think about, again, mental health aspects of things and just how tough life really is when we surpass those things, when we overcome them, when we move out of a place of hurt into a place of healing, when we do the hard work instead of trying to avoid the conflict. At least in my life, I've seen a lot of blessing out of it. And, sometimes in the American church today, blessing means like financial gain or like positive things. But,
health, wealth, and prosperity.
Yeah, but blessings aren't always easy. And sometimes it's a difficult thing, uncomfortable to go through, but at the end of the day, you're more whole for having going through it. And so I think about that a lot, being blessed by going through trials, and it's all for God's glory.
Yeah, I mean, it's the analogy of, trial by fire being a refinement process, like the way gold is shaped. And, there are a million analogies that we can think of in terms of how the Bible applies our everyday lives. This time flew by, and there's a lot, I'd love to continue to talk to you about, but yeah, I mean, I think this is a good jumping off point, and I appreciate you coming by.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to come out here and just have a conversation with you.
Will you come by again?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's continue this conversation. We didn't even get to half of the fart jokes that we wanted to get into, but
Lauren got lucky.
Thanks for stopping by, and I hope that this conversation was helpful, as helpful for you just to talk through as it is for me, and I hope that anybody that decides to listen through this, it's equally as helpful. These conversations are far too often not had, and they are spaced out too long, and so thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask you the questions and being a little vulnerable in answering them. So
absolutely, thank you for having me here and asking those tough questions and giving me the space to answer them.
I appreciate you, my man. I love you, and thanks for coming through.